Jonathan Rogers, author of a number of books, including the Wilder King series and the biography of Flannery O'Connor that he just finished this past year, which is the subject of today's interview. Jonathan, how are you?
Doing well. Glad to reconnect.
Explain the title of your biography, The Terrible Speed of Mercy. Is that a line from one of O'Connor's stories, or what's the significance?
Yeah, it's very near the end, maybe the last page of The Violent Bear It Away. This prophet who has spent the whole book avoiding becoming a prophet finally submits to his calling, and he goes out to warn the children of God of the terrible speed of mercy. That's where that line comes from. I think it's such a perfect distillation of O'Connor's vision that mercy is terrible and swift. You know, we're accustomed to a wrath being terrible and swift, but the idea of mercy being terrible and swift. Her vision of the faith is not safe for the whole family, as the billboards say for the radio stations. You know, I think it's very compelling and very. It's very beautiful. Well, beautiful is the wrong word. It's ugly.
Early in the book, there's this reminiscence of a surgeon's ability to cut out a human heart physically. He says, "Lady, he don't know no more about it than you or me." Talking about the human heart.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think O'Connor's trying to say about the human heart?
Well, you know, she never went in for anybody who tried to oversimplify the human experience, whether that's the Freudian vision of human experience or some sort of oversimplified Christian vision of the human experience. You know, evangelicals are really guilty of oversimplifying the universe that God has given us, and the human universe.
And she's confrontational about that. I mean, and it's pretty clear that she's confronting simplistic faith, not right. Simple faith, but simplistic right. faith.
Yeah.
And so it surprises me. She says, this is a quotation from an interview. She says, "Many of my ardent admirers would be roundly shocked and disturbed if they realize that everything I believe is thoroughly moral, thoroughly Catholic, and that it is these beliefs that give my work its chief characteristic."
See, I feel like it's been pretty typical for people to say she was a Catholic and she was a writer and she wrote this way in spite of the fact that she was Catholic.
But she seems to be saying that she thought, at least early on, that her audience was unaware of what she was really trying to do.
Well, if you read the reviews, it's true. You know, her reviewers just missed it completely. You know, thought she was. One person called her outrageous. What was it, outrageous and blasphemous? He meant it as a compliment. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of the story of her life. Is her admirers thinking what they admired about her was the fact that she was so shocking and so.
So who was her audience? In her mind, who do you think? Who
yeah, I mean, well, she specifically said she was writing to people who thought that God was dead. And so, you know, she famously said, somebody like Dante had the benefit of sharing a worldview with his audience, and so he didn't have to write in extravagant terms. Whereas because her audience was people who assumed that God was dead, she had to shout at them. And you know that everybody knows this quote just about she says to the nearly blind you draw large and startling figures, and to the deaf you shout, to the almost deaf you shout. And you know that's what she's doing because her audience didn't share her worldview. She had this over the top, violent, outrageous style that was a form of shouting. You know, these were large and startling figures that she was drawing because she assumed that her audience were people who didn't share her worldview.
Well, I'm just glad she didn't cut off either one of her ears, so she was at least sane in shouting at people.
That's right.
Was she fighting a particular villain in her day? Was she looking out at the social landscape or the culture? I mean, she calls the South, Christ-haunted rather than Christ-centered. Was she fighting a particular villain?
Wow, that's an interesting question. She was I mean, I think there were many villains she was fighting. Any kind of self-righteousness, whether that came in the form of, I mean, she was much more interested in fighting the self-righteousness of the, what's the word, the sort of progressive, you know, there's a deep self-righteousness in the social progressive, right? That she was very troubled by.
Let's tell someone who's unacquainted with her, where would you start if they've never read her?
Mm-hmm.
Which story would you recommend they start reading first?
I always tell people to start with Revelation, right? Because in every one of O'Connor's stories, there's a moment of violence that's also a moment of revelation in which grace is offered, where the smug and the self-righteous finally see where they stand. So you can read Revelation, and you read that, and you get what Flannery O'Connor is doing in all these other stories where it's not quite as obvious what she's up to. Start with Good Man is Hard to Find in the collected stories. That's advice you can use right there.
What's your favorite?
Man, I love Revelation. I love Good Country People. I really love all of them, but probably Revelation is my favorite.
Jonathan, thanks for the time today.
Well, thank you, Tim.
If you're interested in Jonathan's book, The Terrible Speed of Mercy, see the link below.
Oh, look, this is what it looks like.
Excellent. Take care.
Bye.